Hello, this is Roy Youngblood. My paper covered audio and video streaming in the church, and I want to present that now as part of the course requirements. So I want to jump right into it. Honestly, I thought going into this paper that there would be a large amount of things, history maybe, that was very recent. And what I ran across in looking at the history and the current trends of audio and visual streaming in the church, that was the main focus of it as I began to tear into this and to look at the things that were available to me regarding audio and visual streaming. And so I went in with some preconceived ideas of what I thought I knew about audio and visual streaming, the way that we've used audio and video to communicate the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the things that we've used it for. And what I found was a lot different than what I expected to find. My initial thought going into it was, we'll talk about what we're doing inside the church building, what kind of audio we've used, the PV speakers and, the old clunky cameras in the past and those type of things. But what I found was quite a bit different, and some really good research of things that are available for the church to use. And so I just kind of want to look at that. I looked at it from the perspective of communicating the gospel of Jesus Christ, because really that's what everything that we do is about. Now, part of that can be discipleship and encouragement, but just looking at that. So jumping into it, I attacked it from two parts, obviously. First part is the history of audio and visual streaming in the church. What has been our history? What have we done in the past? How have God's people used these technology tools to get us to the place that we need to go, and to understand what that looks like? And so, we begin to look at that. As I begin to look at that, the adaptability of the church has obviously been a big deal, and it talked about, obviously, first audio streaming. That's the first part of it. And part of my research actually led me to an idea that I hadn't thought of before, and it was the issue of shorthand writing. People learning that from many, many, many centuries ago, and being able to write that down and capture that as a means of audio recording. And so literally, the Bible was translated through this way. It was documented, it was shared, and actually shorthand was a type of very primitive audio streaming, but yet it's something that was used. People wrote down what they heard. They developed a way to capture that person-to-person audio, literally verbal, just like we're speaking now, or I am, in carrying that. And so that was how the Bible was actually recorded and written in a lot of cases, and translated from, into different languages and things. People listened and wrote down what they heard. And so it's amazing to think of it that way, because of, we think of recording devices and things of that nature, and that's not it. Now, moving into the modern history of audio streaming and moving into what we have now, really began in the 1920s, right around the time. Radio initially wasn't a big deal. If you were a techie, you were into radio in the 1920s and things of that nature. And then it began to transform as people began to see it as a means of communication. And there was an evangelist named Paul Rader that took this technology in the Chicago area, and he began to use it to communicate the gospel, because he saw that, it pushing out of the walls of inside a building, out of the walls of the traditional church, being able to reach the common man. And so he used that medium to an excessive way, and he was really one of the first moving into this technology that was able to do it. And so it was interesting to watch, to see that, how he was able to get a hold of that. He just took an invitation to a radio station in the early 1920s and just took advantage of it and began to use that as a medium to communicate to people. So it was just fascinating to look at that and see how that was done. And so, you know, from his perspective, there was still segregation that people were dealing with at the time in the United States. And so for the African American, not so much radio, didn't have the access, didn't have the means, weren't a lot of open doors. And so it was something that they had to become more creative with. Now, the phonograph was still around, but there was an evangelist by the name of James Gates who would literally record his messages onto a phonograph and sell them. And the first recording he made was in Atlanta, Georgia. And it sold very rapidly, very quickly. And Capitol Records in New York heard about it. They had him come up there, releasing thousands and thousands. And so part of the history I didn't know about the message of Christ was that people actually use records to record sermons. He was very well known and a very much passionate pastor, passionate evangelist and preacher. And so he began to use that medium to use audio to, again, spread the message of the gospel. And of course, once tape recording became available in the 1940s and then 50s, ultimately to cassette tapes that were so prevalent many years ago, that was able to, you know, massively, rapidly reproduce preaching, teaching, those type of things. We were able to do that. And so the church embraced that technology from the audio perspective. Now, obviously the flip side of that is video. Television gave birth, and we see in the 1950s, it really began to take form. It was, you know, broadcast into American homes. And again, technology caught up with, the church caught up with its day. There was an early evangelist, very well known, by the name of Billy Graham, who embraced this. And he actually started in 1951. It ran for 3 or 4 years. He had a program called The Hour of Decision. It ran on ABC Network. How great it would be to see that type of show come back into American homes again, if our major networks would allow it. And he just began to bring that. He called it The Hour of Decision. Then he really jumped out with his crusades in 1957 when he was in New York's Madison Square Garden. He broadcast that crusade, and you know, it was recorded and then broadcast. And the very last night he did a live stream. So here's where live streaming comes in from television, first of all. And it's Billy Graham doing that. They carried it live. He preached to 18,000 people in the arena, but the reality is during the crusade, he reached about 6.5 million people inside of their homes with the message. So there again, taking advantage of what is there, and, you know, putting out the 1-800 number that he always used in his crusades, inviting people to call, receive Christ, receive counseling. And the amazing thing is he would then take that and connect those people to churches in their area where they were living, that he was in partnership with. So it's just a great visionary, really. I mean, we think of Billy Graham, you know, the man behind the pulpit, calling people out, calling people to Christ. But yet he was so much more than that. He had a wider ability to see what was around him and connect that to people, and it made such a huge difference. And so it was encouraging to see that. Now, on the flip side of that, as I began to do research, I could not help. I couldn't look past it, and it's actually in the paper as well. I know there's controversy and all the sometimes things that go around with the issue of Christian Broadcasting Network, the 700 Clubs, the programs, you know, this person's this, and there's always criticism that surrounds it. But then nevertheless, in looking at the history of audio and visual streaming, you couldn't help but look at it in the fact that this program, again, started in 1963 as a television program, and then the network started the 700 Club 3 years later. It's still on the air. It's still, you know, on ABC every single day. They would love to get rid of it, and they're in an ironclad contract. They can't do anything with it. So they still get that message out every single day. and, you know, the different ministries that are involved in that. And through that, the prayer line is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Statistics tell us that they receive over 11,000 calls per day, each and every day. And they estimate that since 1963, 2.8 million people, men, women, and children, have made professions of faith and received salvation through the telephone line. So there again, it's just taking advantage of what's there. It's using what we have to the very best of our abilities to do that. Now we move into the modern area of audio and video. You know, obviously the World Wide Web has transformed everything. It has changed everything that we do. And audio is no different. When you look at the audio side of things, you know, the podcast is just a huge part of this. It's a digital file, very simple, over the internet, computer or mobile device, just like I'm using now, a mobile phone. And it's very popular right now. Tom Rainer made an observation that, you know, the ebook wasn't everything that we thought it was going to be, but listeners are listening to podcasts. They're listening to them as they work out. They're listening to them as they drive, exercise. You know, it's just something that they're using to sow into themselves and build themselves. And so, you know, using that within the church has tremendous opportunities. When you think about the Wednesday night study, or, you know, a special series that you may be teaching on marriage or family, being able to turn that into a 3 or 4 part podcast, you know. And, you know, if your church is like any other church, you have people that are not able to come for health reasons because, you know, extended family, there's just all different types of situations, to be able to reach those people, you know, and they can still remain connected with their church through audio, through listening to those things, you know. It's just being able to use those. And I had to take a look with audio, really where my mind had been, not only in the streaming part of it, using the web, but also within the body of Christ itself. And I just could not overlook that the technology that's available, even for the traditional worship experience where people come together and worship, is being transformed. It hasn't been. It's actually happening now. And, you know, the way that things are broadcast, instead of streaming loudspeakers at people, now we are able to, with technology, create a worship experience where the person is actually participating in it. It's done by a series of speakers and different things spread throughout, so you don't see the big traditional loudspeaker, but technology has really helped us in that area. And it's brought the environment in, and that's such an important part of worship, in the audio, in the singing, and those type of things that we know. Bringing that environment means so much to people now because of what's happening in our world and the uncertainty of it. To be able to have that experience is such a big deal, and audio is really helping in that area right now. Obviously, you know, with the podcast and the web and recorded sermons and all of the things that are there, things are available to us that we haven't been able to use in the past. Now, obviously, video's made inroads as well. I mean, what I'm doing right now, to be able to quickly take this, put it up on YouTube, and then transmit it to whoever would watch it within the class, say. Unheard of at one time, but now it's very real. And so, you know, websites, the media, social media, certainly a huge deal, with Facebook, with, you know, Twitter, with different things that we're able to do with technology. I know my wife videos my sermons on Sunday, runs them live on Facebook as I'm preaching, and we have different people that we've known throughout the years that, for whatever various reason, if they're not in church or can't be in church that day, know, you know, at 10:40, you know, 11:15 on Sunday, you know, I can hit this Facebook page and it become part of a worship experience. And so, you know, we know 69% of Americans actually use a social media site. So it's just a way to connect people. It's amazing to watch and see how that's done. You know, as churches grow and adapt to it, they're able to spread that. I mean, with the smartphones and all of those things that are happening, it's just amazing. And even the simplicity of not having to have the big bulky camera anymore. I know Mevo makes a camera that is amazing. It's $500 and it is 1080. It's high definition. Tie it in your audio, tie it into your system. It's amazing what it can do. And it gives churches, you don't have to have the tens of thousands of dollars of budget, because high-speed internet is there now. Streaming is available. The high-speed internet in my home speed is unreal. And it's strange. There's nothing special about the company. It's just what's out there now is technology is so much there. So it's been amazing to look at this. But even so, this does not mean TV is necessarily out of the picture. As I was studying this, one of the observations was TV is the last great American campfire. It's the last place where Americans can come together and see the same thing all at the same time and be able to interact that way. So very neat project. Didn't really had preconceived ideas, about church buildings and, the history of how somebody set up in a sound booth. Wasn't at all like that. It's so much different now, and things that we're able to do in the amazing history that the church has embraced. Part of the perspective in doing this is, what is it going to look like in the future? Well, only God knows that. Only God knows the next technology. So I didn't take that approach, because that would just be wishful thinking. I don't think any of us knows what technology is going to be like 2 years from now or 5 years from now, what it is going to be like. But whatever it is, the churches that remain relevant are going to be the ones that adapt and adjust and do the things that are necessary and understand what their mission is. Their mission is not to hold on to the past. Their mission is to move forward and embrace the things that need to be done so that people's lives are, number one, changed by an encounter with Jesus Christ, and number two, strengthened by keeping the spiritual discipline of discipleship a very real part of Christian life. So I appreciate the opportunity to do this. I appreciate you watching. Thank you.